寄ってらっしゃい、見てらっしゃい。闇芝居の時間だよ。
これは若い YouTuber の話です。
Yamishibai, Theater of Darkness. And I know, it's been around for a while, but with October here, I wanted to make a Halloween-inspired video. You know, instead of being out pretending I'm having fun apple picking like a normal person. Instead, I decided to watch almost every season currently available, and it wasn't too difficult considering each episode is only 4 minutes long. And I believe this was done on purpose as the number 4 is considered unlucky in Japan. Now, I won't be providing an overview for the stories, I'll simply be just talking about my reaction to some of the ones I liked the most and some of the ones I just didn't really care for. So obviously I'll be mentioning spoilers, so please go watch the show and then come back and watch the review. For those of you still here, why don't we get into the Halloween spirit a bit? Turn the lights out, turn off all the outside noise, and let's dive into this shit. In terms of how scary the episodes are, I'd say it's like 50-50, and even then, maybe I'm being generous. When episodes failed to be scary, it was mainly because it seemed like the writer didn't know how to end the story. They'd just throw in a jump scare or some generic bullshit. And there's nothing actually wrong with jump scares, I'm, personally not a fan, but it is something that anybody can do. The saving grace of the show is that the build-up for each episode is still generally unnerving, even if they can't stick the landing at the end. The animation and that old film filter enhances the creepiness factor. It has that stiff animated style that reminds me a lot of the cutscenes from Twisted Metal 2. Those cutscenes always scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. As an adult, it's still kind of off-putting, but mostly just hilarious. I mean, look how insane Calypso's face looks. This style is a unique way to tell a story in the modern age, where if they really wanted to animate the show fully, they obviously could, but this style serves an artistic purpose. The slow motion zoom-ins on the characters with their frozen facial expressions, the mouths not moving when the characters speak. I'm sure this is highly subjective, but I sometimes find cheap effects or animations to be more jarring and ultimately scarier than a beautifully rendered CG monster. The voice acting is tremendous, and it kinda has to be for something like this to be successful. I never felt like any of the performers were mailing it in. Now, contrary to my anecdotal story, the style obviously doesn't come from Twisted Metal 2, but it is inspired by a form of Japanese storytelling called Yamishibai, or paper play. In the modern era, folk tales would be told on street corners by Yamishibai narrators who would show off their illustrations to go along with the tales being told. The modern form started sometime around the Great Depression in the 1930s, with thousands of Yamishibai performing in Tokyo alone during this period. And their stories weren't just scary ones like the ones we're going to cover in Yamishibai, but they did have many different genres, even the superhero genre, performing for dozens of children at a time and doing multiple shows a day. The storyteller would usually take their bike to an area with heavy foot traffic and hit their clapping sticks, or hyoshigi, to get the kids' attention. There would also be snacks sold as well, which, considering they were on a street corner and anybody could watch, I imagine tips and the snack sales was how they made money. The wooden box that we watch the stories in is called a butai. It kind of looks like a mini stage, like you're in a theater or something, about to enter a new world. Some of the boxes would be equipped with the ability to make sounds. Yamishibai would go by the wayside once television came along, of course. Most committed Yamishibai artists would then become manga artists, something we are much more accustomed to today. Yamishibai is usually clumped in with the much older Japanese traditions of using pictures to tell stories. These go back as far as the 8th century, or even older than that, according to some. But I see Yamishibai as distinctly its own thing and just another neat part of Japanese culture. Now, with this anime, the stories are all horror stories that are usually related to Japanese folklore and urban legends, so some of the endings and meanings of the stories may be lost on those of us in the West. Admittingly, I found myself confused at a handful of the endings. However, I won't use that as a blanket excuse for some of the episodes just failing to be cohesive. Some really were poorly executed. In Yamishibai, we have our own Yamishibai narrator that appears before almost every episode, with the opening theme, if you will, just being the clapping of the drum as kids show up. So let's go season by season here. Season 1, way too reliant on jump scares. My favorite episodes, if I had to pick, would probably be episodes 12 and 13. Both managed to give me that haunting feeling afterwards where I found myself thinking about them long after the episodes ended. Definitely check those ones out. Season 2. They changed the locale of the narrator of Yamishibai. This time, they're outside of a carnival. Honestly, this season's style is indistinguishable from Season 1. Nothing really changes. However, the first episode, Taro-chan, gave the season a strong start with the haunted ventriloquist dummy. Puppets or dummies will always freak me out. That's just the way it is. When I was a child, my grandma decided to buy us ventriloquist dummies for myself and my siblings, because that doesn't sound like the start of a horror movie. For me, she bought the Danny O'Day dummy. I mean, look at it. Fucking thing's nightmare fuel. And that's exactly what happened. It literally gave me a nightmare so bad that I woke up screaming. That's the only time that's ever happened. And the next day, I promptly threw the thing into the sewer. I probably ended up creating an It dummy hybrid. But, oh well, not my problem. I don't live there anymore. The episode itself builds tension as the ventriloquist slowly realizes he can't control the dummy and it's moving on its own. The kids laughing at the show adds to the creepy feeling of it all. The worst episode was not because of a jump scare, but episode 2, Kitchen, was just such a weak story, and the ending was a great example of the writer not knowing how to end it. He builds up this story of a girl seeing this weird monster that's appearing, and the other girl can't see it, so she eventually just runs out of the room and out of the house, but then the monster engulfs the whole town? Like, yeah, that doesn't work. I'm sorry. Episode 3, Inside Doll, is much better, with this haunted Russian doll turning a family into lifeless zombies, essentially. This also reminded me of another nightmare I had, where I was in a classroom and everybody started turning into wooden dolls. And if you looked at them in the eye, you would also turn into one. I don't know why, I feel like now I'm talking about my dreams more than the show. Maybe that should have been a Yamishibai episode. Episode 7, Capsule Toy Machine, has a nice little message wrapped up into it. Don't spend too much time focusing on your past, or you will waste whatever is left of your life. Like I said, the stories for Season 2 weren't much different than Season 1, except they started to become a little more thought out. Season 3 of Yamishibai starts out a little different. The narrator, or narrator-san, is seemingly not there, and instead we get a boy singing while he draws. And at the end of each episode, we see the Yamishibai mask singing into the boy's ear, with the number of masks growing with each episode. We also get to see what the boy is drawing at the end of each episode. And that's basically the recurring theme this season, monsters every episode. And I like this. What little kid wasn't doodling monsters when they were bored in school? I was always drawing Godzilla or dinosaurs when I was bored. Difference is they didn't come to life. Episode 1's bathhouse monster and episode 2's insects, the ones that have human body parts for their appendages, those might be my favorite monsters of the whole season. I think the monsters get progressively more silly after that. Episode 8, the Empress doll, has probably the scariest moment. The life-size doll appearing in the reflection, but not in the real world, slowly taking the one girl. But then they ruin the whole damn episode with this. They already nailed it. It was already scary, and then that whole whatever the hell that was just made it so stupid with that ridiculous laugh. The finale of Season 3 is interesting in that it tries to tie the whole season together by showing the boy who sketches being watched by a teacher. She starts to notice that his terrifying ability to bring things from the quote-unquote other side is quite real. She is eventually caught and done in by the boy and his monsters, which I believe we get to see every monster from the season, which is pretty awesome. We then see that the boy himself, unless I'm misinterpreting this, is the Yamishibai narrator. But I guess when he was a kid. One theory I had was that Season 3 of Yamishibai is chronologically before Season 1, when the Yamishibai was just a child and he was just discovering his dark storytelling ability. And because he's a child, the stories all revolve around monsters, which, like I said earlier, is pretty fitting for a kid. Maybe as a little clue or Easter egg for us, they should have had random frames in each episode of the child drawing in the background, out of focus. I'm open to any other theories on that, please share them. From what I've read online, most people found this season to be too predictable. We always knew that there'd be a monster of some kind that eventually appears and eats or kills the main character. Season 4 starts out in a similar style to Season 1, except the narrator is now voiced by different voice actors in each episode, and he is much more talkative, with the actual characters not saying as much as the episode goes along. This style makes more sense to the tradition of Yamishibai, but I much prefer when the narrator only gives us the intro and telling us the story is over. Another change is the random usage of live-action footage. Again, this isn't something I liked, I don't really see the point. A lot of experimenting going on here in this season. Episode 6, Guess Who, even draws the characters in a generic anime style, rather than the more realistic renderings in the previous seasons. I'm assuming they alternated animators for some episodes. Episode 8, Cassette Tape, stuck out the most for me. I just love the concept of him listening to old recordings of himself, just for it to slowly evolve into him saying nonsense. And eventually in the recordings, he's talking about days he hasn't even lived yet. Very unsettling and haunting. Episode 7, Footsteps. This, of course, made me laugh. It's like the worst nightmare of somebody who doesn't like using public bathrooms. This poor bastard is just trying to take a shit, and he accidentally goes into a stall that takes him to some dark realm or something. I don't know. Poor guy. Overall, Season 4 seemed like more of an experimental season, just throwing shit against the wall to see what sticks. The ending theme of each episode was probably the best part. An upbeat song while we watch the Yamishibai head to work. Season 5's opening is basically the same as Season 4's, except the narrator is back to just having one voice actor, and he doesn't talk throughout the episode anymore. Thank God. We also see him telling the stories to, I think, all women. And for the most part, each story's main character, or ghost, is represented as a woman, so I guess that's the theme of the season. We do get some firsts this season too, with episode 1 showing the main character basically saying fuck it and actually fighting back for once, not just being a victim. Episode 3, The Crow Children, is another first. We finally get an episode where the main character doesn't necessarily meet their end. What's great is it still manages to be scary and drives home whatever point it was trying to make without the girl or mother ending up dead, or in this case, turned into a crow. Episode 10, Flower Reading, would be another example of an episode ending not so badly for the main character. I think having some episodes end positively for the characters is definitely a welcome change. Not because I want every story to have a happy ending, I don't even want most of the stories to have happy endings, but if every story ends poorly for the main character, then the show loses a dramatic element. There's no tension, as we already know they have no shot of escaping. Kind of an odd example, but that's a part of what made me love the old Law and Order episodes. Sometimes the bad guys got away with murder, and that made every episode's resolution have heightened tension. Predictability and things just being too familiar is a death sentence for the horror genre, so Yamishibai made a good decision this season. Now we come to what might be my favorite episode in the entire show. Episode 7, Hide and Seek. That thing, or the crone, as the grandma calls it, looking for her grandson, who, of course, doesn't listen to her warning like an asshole, reminded me of The Haunting of Hill House. Particularly the scene of the floating guy finding the little kid under the bed. Just excellent build-up and a nicely executed fake-out here. The crone's voice and the little bit we see of its body coming up the stairs also freaked me out. The way the parents forget the boy's existence afterward is so sad. And you get the feeling by the zoom in on the grandma at the end that she's devastated because she probably can remember him but can't say anything as the boy never existed in this reality. At least as far as everybody else is concerned, even his own parents. And then you get the final shot of the boy just being a straw doll or scarecrow in the window now. The same thing that piqued his interest at the beginning of the episode. Episode 13, Seductress, is on the opposite side of the spectrum in terms of predictability, a femme fatale praying mantis monster eating men, a reference to female praying mantises sometimes eating their mates. The ending tries to do something similar to what Season 3 did, tying in the narrator to the story directly, but I really couldn't get this one. I don't know what they were going for here. At the time of me making this video, this would actually be the last time the narrator would really do anything interesting in terms of interacting with the characters of the stories. Season 5 is definitely one of my favorite seasons of Yamishibai. Even with the finale being disappointing, there was enough variety, and the additions of endings where the main characters don't always die or meet some horrible fate was definitely a plus. Season 6. Our narrator becomes the yokai of the forest, I guess. If I had to talk about the best episodes of Season 6, it would start with Episode 4, Swamp Offering. Very nice twist here, I definitely recommend that one. My favorite episode though would be Episode 11, Frozen Memories. Season 6, honestly, might be the season with the smartest characters. Some of them managed not to do stupid shit during their ordeals. And they even listen to the warnings. It's a nice change of pace. Definitely watch this episode, it's worth the 4 minutes of your time. Of course, it would have been cool to see whatever the monster was in this episode. We, of course, don't. But it's also interesting that the episode ends with him calling his wife. And I think most people are aware that marriages tend to end when a child is lost. So perhaps if he didn't have his wife, he would have opened the door and faced whatever it was just to possibly see his child again. Season 7. The narrator is now in a dark room of sorts. I feel like they just kind of gave up at this point trying to do anything interesting with him. We start with 2 subpar episodes, and then we get episode 3, The Reception Room. This one delivers a slow burning story that shows this cursed doll drain the life force from this old couple that never had children. It's a mix of sadness and creepiness rolled into one, and I like how subtly the doll changes and grows in size and becomes more real as time passes, along with the old couple's life slowly deteriorating. Episode 5, Notice of Termination of Service, has a couple of fun things in it as well. The whole episode leans in on the whole number 4 being unlucky in Japan thing, with our main character even staying the night in room 404. Not only is 4 unlucky, but in the internet age, 404 is also associated with the classic and annoying 404 not found page. Though the number 4 thing is cool, this is still a pretty predictable entry. The second I saw the TV showing all the deceased, you just knew he was going to end up on that television by the end of the episode. Episode 8, Cough. Symbolic of the whole season, the stories are just lacking in terms of characters making rational decisions, plus some odd conveniences in the stories. The old man comes off as kinda scary, but when he comes back as a ghost, it really just, it's more comical than anything. Like, you don't even know if they died or whatever. He just turns into like this giant head. I don't know. It just didn't work. It ended up being more funny than bad. Also, this girl doesn't have her own smartphone. I mean, I don't know. It just didn't work. Speaking of comical, this season probably has the funniest episode in the entire series. Episode 11, Little Sister's Room. We finally get an episode with a fat, older otaku brother. I just love how the episode ends. The sister, the friend, nobody likes him, and even the ghost is just like, I suppose he'll do, before dragging him into an abyss. At least he has a new ghost waifu. It's a funny way to end a funny episode. Now we get to one of the more unique episodes in the series. Episode 13, Refrigerator. It's literally a horror story from the perspective of a refrigerator. And I actually really liked it. You just slowly see the life of a family as time passes from the fridge's perspective. I wasn't entirely sure about what was going on here, but I guess the boy that the fridge can see died early on, because obviously he doesn't age as years go by, so he's a ghost of some kind. And I guess the boy haunting the family is when all the problems start and the refrigerator stops being filled up. There's a lot here, and I don't know. It just worked. It was a very interesting way to tell a story, especially a scary story. The best one is episode 9, The Woman in the Elevator. It's a complete misdirection. Like, sometimes I'm watching these episodes and I already freaking know what's gonna happen, like, 5 seconds in. This episode actually tricked me at the end. I was like, oh, shit. And the fact that they had the handsome neighbor act all cool, calm, and collected, even in the face of a ghost, that seemed real to me. Like, that is how a sociopath would act. Definitely a serial killer. Best episode of the season, mixing a true evil we face in the real world with the frightening supernatural experience of seeing a ghost. Season 8. This season is like the opposite of Season 3. that had us see all those crazy monsters. In season 8, we don't get to see shit. They seem to start following the rules set by Alfred Hitchcock and other movies like Godzilla and Jaws. The less you show of the monster at the beginning, the better. Except we never see the monster here. And some fans seem to like this change. Personally, I like when they show a little of whatever is causing the trouble, like in Hide and Seek. So then the rest we can kind of just leave to the imagination. But this season, we almost never see the malevolence that's stalking people. There are 3 episodes in particular that I thought did this well, and the stories themselves were intriguing. Episode 2, Death Day, did a really good job building us up for something we thought we were going to get, and then they completely fucked with our expectations here. All seems safe, but then we realize our main character can see the ghost unlike everybody else, and she knows that's definitely not their deceased mom, but something else. We never find out what it is, but her reaction is all we need.
違うって。
今入ってきたのお母さんじゃない。
見えるのか。
見えるから言ってんのよ。なんなのよこいつ。
Who knows, maybe the thing was just trying to get a free meal every 10 years and she blew its cover. Episode 3, Don't Look Back, is based on an old Greek legend. Or if you want, you could just think of the scene from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I like to think of the story from the Bible with Lot's wife disobeying the angels, looking back at the city, and then she's turned to ash. That's basically what this episode is. This guy just isn't supposed to look behind him, and of course, like an idiot, he eventually does. Episode 9, Antlion Pit. It is just corporate burnout, the episode. That's all. As I mentioned already, this season had a big focus on not showing us whatever was haunting the characters. And even if some may disagree, I think it really worked for a fun, kinda scary campfire story feel. Now, they did do a live action season where they would put real life photos of people, and these were actually like normal length episodes of 23 minutes. There would be 3 stories, 2 retellings of stories we already heard just with this new format, and then there would be another new story thrown in. I did not watch this. I don't know, maybe next year. I just didn't really see the point. So on to season 9, the most recent season that just wrapped up as I'm making this video. This has the Yamishibai telling stories based on all the animals of the Chinese zodiac. Because each season has 13 episodes and there are only 12 animals in the Chinese zodiac, one episode is for the year of the cat, because Japan, that's why. I'll be honest, I found this season to just be straight up lacking in creativity, originality, I don't know. Pick an adjective, it just, nothing stood out for me. Episode 10 might be the only one because it had a pretty nice twist. That's a nice one because they don't even really spell it out for you at the end. You actually have to kind of look up what Botan means. And for those who didn't look it up, definitely look up what Botan means and then you'll understand what happened to Nato's friend. So ultimately, Yamishibai is fun enough to keep you watching and is a pretty interesting idea when you consider its history. This show is at its best when it isn't resorting to jump scares for the big finale and is actually crafting stories with some sort of twist, or leaning on ancient stories and putting a modern spin on them. Like I said at the start, jump scares or a lazy ending with a monster showing up, well, anybody can do that, even a lowly YouTuber like myself. Anyway, enjoy the Halloween season, and I'll talk to you all next time. Wait, the fucking mute button was on? But wait, it recorded. How did it record? Non-disc!
惜しい。